If your goal is to grow the most food possible from your backyard, tomatoes probably shouldn't be the first crop you plant. That might sound strange because tomatoes are one of America's favorite garden vegetables, but they're also one of the most demanding. They need regular pruning, sturdy support, consistent watering, and they're vulnerable to problems like hornworms, early blight, late blight, blossom end rot, cracking, and splitting. Now, that doesn't mean you should never grow tomatoes. It simply means that if you're trying to maximize harvests from limited space, there are several crops that can produce more food with less attention. Today, we're looking at 5 of the best alternatives that many experienced gardeners quietly rely on year after year. By the end of this video, you'll know which plants deserve the most valuable space in your garden this season. Before we dive in, if you enjoy practical gardening advice based on real growing experience, not internet myths, consider following Oak and Acre. Every week we share simple ways to help you grow more food with less waste, whether you have a backyard, a few raised beds, or just a sunny patio. Now let's start with why tomatoes have earned their reputation, and why that reputation doesn't always tell the whole story. Tomatoes became popular because they're incredibly versatile. Fresh sandwiches, pasta sauce, salsa, salads, it's easy to see why nearly every gardener grows them. But popularity isn't the same as productivity. Most indeterminate tomato varieties take around 70 to 90 days before producing ripe fruit. During that time, they require staking or cagging, regular pruning, and consistent moisture to avoid stress-related problems. Even then, weather can undo weeks of work. A stretch of humid conditions can encourage fungal diseases. A sudden heat wave can reduce fruit set. Heavy rain may split ripe tomatoes overnight. If your goal is fresh tomatoes for summer meals, they're worth growing. But if your goal is filling the pantry and feeding your household from a limited space, there are crops that often deliver a greater return with fewer setbacks. And the first one surprises many gardeners. If you've never grown zucchini before, it's easy to underestimate just how productive a single healthy plant can be. Most varieties mature in roughly 45 to 60 days, noticeably faster than many slicing tomatoes. Once harvesting begins, plants continue producing new fruit every few days as long as mature zucchini are picked regularly. The secret is consistency. When fruit is harvested while it's still young, usually around 6 to 8 inches long, the plant keeps directing energy toward producing more blossoms instead of slowing down to mature oversized fruit. That's why experienced gardeners often check zucchini plants every day during peak summer production. Miss just a couple of days, and a perfectly sized zucchini can quickly grow into one weighing several pounds. Another advantage is flexibility. Many people assume zucchini requires a huge amount of space because the plants naturally sprawl across the ground. That's true if you let them. But many home gardeners now grow bush varieties vertically using a single stake and soft plant ties. This keeps leaves off damp soil, improves air circulation, makes harvesting easier, and helps reduce some fungal problems. It also frees up valuable growing space for additional crops nearby. Of course, zucchini isn't perfect. Squash vine borers can be devastating in many parts of the United States. Powdery mildew often appears late in the season. Large leaves need plenty of airflow. Those are real challenges, but many gardeners still consider them easier to manage than the long list of issues tomatoes commonly face. Here's one more tip that beginners often overlook. Zucchini flowers aren't just beautiful, they're edible. Many gardeners harvest a few of the male blossoms for cooking, while leaving enough behind to pollinate the developing fruit. It's a simple way to get even more from the same plant without reducing your harvest. Now let's move to a crop that doesn't just feed your family, it also improves your soil while it's growing. Bush beans don't usually get the same attention as tomatoes. They're not as colorful. They aren't the centerpiece of summer gardens. But when experienced gardeners are trying to maximize production from a limited space, bush beans almost always make the list. Here's why. Unlike tomatoes, which require continual support as they grow taller, bush beans stay compact, generally reaching only 18 to 24 inches in height. That makes them perfect for raised beds, suburban backyards, and even large containers. Most varieties are ready to harvest in 50 to 60 days, and once production starts, you'll often be picking fresh beans every 2 or 3 days for several weeks. However, the harvest is only half the story. Bush beans belong to the legume family. That means they form a partnership with naturally occurring soil bacteria that help convert atmospheric nitrogen into forms plants can use. While most of that nitrogen stays inside the roots until the plants decompose, rotating beans through your garden can contribute to healthier soil over time and reduce the need for additional nitrogen fertilizer in future plantings. It's one reason many gardeners include beans in their crop rotation every single year. Tomatoes consume nutrients. Bush beans help build healthier soil for whatever comes next. Here's another advantage that many beginners never consider. Bush beans mature all at once over a relatively short period. That's exactly what makes them excellent for freezing, pressure canning, and preserving. Instead of harvesting a handful of vegetables here and there throughout summer, you can collect several pounds over the course of a week and preserve them in one afternoon. For anyone focused on food security, that efficiency matters. Now, bush beans aren't maintenance-free. Mexican bean beetles can chew through leaves. Japanese beetles may feed on foliage in some regions. Wet weather occasionally encourages fungal diseases. Fortunately, good spacing between plants, watering at soil level instead of overhead, and rotating planting locations each season go a long way toward reducing those problems. Compared with the continual pruning, staking, tying, and disease monitoring tomatoes often require, many gardeners find bush beans surprisingly easy to manage. And there's another trick. Instead of planting one large crop, sow a new row every 2 weeks until midsummer. This practice, called succession planting, extends your harvest dramatically and keeps fresh beans coming long after the first planting finishes. So far, we've looked at crops that produce plenty of food above ground. But the next plant changes the equation entirely. Instead of harvesting once and pulling it out, you'll keep coming back to the same plant week after week. That's why many experienced gardeners consider it one of the hardest working vegetables in the entire garden. If you've only grown spinach, Swiss chard might not seem very exciting at first. The leaves look familiar. The care seems almost identical. But once summer arrives, their differences become obvious. Spinach is a cool season crop. When temperatures consistently climb above about 75 degrees F, many varieties respond by bolting, sending up flower stalks instead of producing tender leaves. Swiss chard behaves differently. Because it's closely related to beets rather than spinach, it tolerates heat remarkably well. Across much of the United States, including the South, Southwest, and much of the Midwest, it can continue producing long after spinach has disappeared from the garden. Here's the harvesting technique that makes all the difference. Never remove the entire plant. Instead, cut the largest outer leaves close to the base, while leaving the younger center leaves untouched. Within days, those younger leaves continue growing, giving you another harvest without replanting. Gardeners call this the cut-and-come-again method, and it's one of the easiest ways to increase food production from a single planting. With regular harvesting, healthy plants can remain productive for many months, and in mild winter regions, some gardeners harvest from the same plants well into the following year. If you're picking up a tip you haven't heard before, consider subscribing to Oak and Acre. We share practical gardening advice designed to help everyday gardeners harvest more food without making the process more complicated. Swiss chard isn't perfect, of course. Leaf miners occasionally tunnel through the foliage. Slugs sometimes damage young seedlings. Aphids can gather on the undersides of leaves during warm weather. Fortunately, healthy soil, proper spacing, and checking plants regularly usually keep those issues manageable. When you compare that with the long list of common tomato problems, from hornworms and blight to blossom end rot and fruit cracking, it's easy to understand why Swiss chard earns a permanent place in so many productive gardens. If you've always assumed potatoes require a huge garden, think again. One of the smartest techniques modern home gardeners use is growing potatoes in fabric grow bags. Whether you have a backyard, a patio, a gravel driveway, or even a sunny corner beside your garage, grow bags make potato production possible almost anywhere. Unlike tomatoes, which spend months producing fruit a little at a time, potatoes reward your patience with one satisfying harvest of calorie-dense food that stores for months under the right conditions. For families interested in becoming more self-sufficient, that's a major advantage. One harvest can keep supplying your kitchen long after summer is over. Here's why grow bags work so well. Potato plants naturally produce tubers along buried stems. As the plants grow taller, gardeners add more loose soil or compost around the stems, a process known as hilling. That encourages additional potatoes to form while protecting developing tubers from sunlight. This matters because potatoes exposed to light turn green and begin producing solanine, a naturally occurring compound that makes them unsuitable for eating. Grow bags simplify the entire process. Instead of digging trenches through heavy soil, you're working inside one lightweight container that's easy to water, easy to move if necessary, and easy to harvest at the end of the season. Of course, potatoes still have their challenges. Colorado potato beetles are a common pest across many parts of the United States. Wet conditions can encourage diseases like early blight and late blight. And inconsistent watering may reduce tuber size. Fortunately, fabric grow bags help improve drainage and airflow around the root zone, reducing some moisture-related problems. The biggest mistake beginners make isn't underwatering. It's harvesting too early. Once the foliage naturally yellows and dies back, leave the potatoes in the soil for another week or two if conditions are dry. That extra time allows the skins to toughen, making them easier to store for months after harvest. Now let's finish with one of the fastest growing vegetables you'll ever plant. It doesn't take months. It doesn't need expensive equipment. And if you use it correctly, it can make every square foot of your garden work harder. Most gardeners think bigger vegetables automatically mean better harvests. That's not always true. Some of the most productive gardens succeed because they make every inch of space count. That's exactly where radishes and green onions shine. Radishes are among the fastest vegetables you can grow. Many spring varieties mature in as little as 21 to 30 days, making them ideal for succession planting. Instead of waiting 2 or 3 months for one crop, you can harvest several rounds in the same amount of time. Now pair those radishes with bunching onions. Because their root systems occupy different zones in the soil, they grow well together without competing heavily for space. While the radishes mature quickly and leave the bed, the onions continue developing. This simple interplanting strategy allows one section of your garden to produce food continuously instead of sitting empty between harvests. Professional market gardeners have relied on this principle for years because empty soil doesn't produce food. Occupied soil does. Another benefit, often overlooked, is flexibility. Radishes fit beautifully between slower-growing vegetables early in the season. By the time larger crops spread out, the radishes have already been harvested. That's free production from space that otherwise would have gone unused. Green onions offer similar value. Instead of harvesting the entire plant, many gardeners trim only the leaves or harvest selectively, allowing new growth to continue throughout the season. Little efficiencies like these are what separate productive gardens from average ones. Like every crop we've covered today, they still require attention. Radishes become woody if left in the ground too long. Hot weather can make some varieties spicy and encourage bolting. Green onions appreciate consistent moisture for tender growth. Fortunately, these are easy problems to avoid with regular harvesting and proper timing. By now, you've probably noticed something. None of these vegetables are completely maintenance-free. Every crop has pests. Every crop has diseases. Every crop has conditions it prefers. The difference isn't that these 5 plants are perfect. The difference is that they often provide more dependable harvests, better use of limited space, and greater overall food production for the amount of work most home gardeners invest. That doesn't mean you should stop growing tomatoes forever. If fresh tomatoes are one of your favorite summer foods, absolutely grow a few plants. But if your goal is building a productive backyard garden that fills your kitchen with fresh food week after week, consider giving more space to crops that consistently deliver. A balanced garden almost always outperforms a garden built around a single favorite vegetable. If you're planning your next garden, challenge yourself to replace just one tomato plant with one of the crops we covered today. You might be surprised by how much more food you harvest over the course of the season. And if you enjoy practical gardening advice that helps you grow more while wasting less time and money, subscribe to Oak and Acre. We share new videos every week to help you build a healthier, more productive backyard, one harvest at a time. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.